Hello everyone, this is the long-awaited guide on overclocking Samsung DDR5 RAM. So, what do you need to know about them? Firstly, there are several types, but I categorized them into two, locked and unlocked. Unfortunately, I have the locked ones. What does that mean? It means that the maximum voltage I can apply will be approximately 1.435 volt. If they were unlocked, there would be no restrictions, and you could go up to 2 volts. However, it's not advisable to use such high voltages. Great, we'll be using these Samsung modules. I'll be using them with cooling, meaning I'll install a fan on them. Here's a photo of what it should look like. Your Samsung modules may come with heatsinks, but adding some extra cooling won't hurt. Samsung chips run very hot, with a power consumption of 6 to 7 watts per module, which is quite high. Heat dissipation is significant, so make sure to take care of their cooling or use very low voltages. Now, first and foremost, you need to make sure you indeed have Samsung RAM. To do this, run the OCCT program, go to the System Info tab, and select Memory Module. Here, we can see that I currently have Hynix RAM in my computer. So, while I'm installing Samsung modules in my PC, please check your modules and ensure that this guide is suitable for you. Excellent, let's move on to the BIOS. First, make sure that your RAM is installed in the second and fourth slots. This means that the first slot from the CPU can be empty, the second should have a module, the third should be empty, and the fourth should have a module. Otherwise, it won't work properly or might not work at all. Here, Gigabyte immediately identified that we have Samsung RAM. As you've understood, this guide is for Gigabyte motherboards with an i7-12700KF processor, but the processor can be any, and you can do the same on other motherboards following a similar process. However, I'll also make one for MSI in the future. Great, press F2, and first of all, I suggest setting the frequencies. Let's do it right away. If you have a processor without the K suffix, such as 12400, 12700F, or 13400, your memory controller voltages are locked. This means that you won't be able to achieve very high memory frequencies. Therefore, you can focus on tweaking the timings at a lower frequency. Don't worry, everything is fine. If you have a K-series processor, the frequencies can be higher. Let's start with a frequency of around 5800. Moving on, we need the CPU VCCSA voltage, which is the voltage for the memory controller. Set it in the range of 1.15 to 1.3 volts. However, keep in mind that there's no need to use such high voltages for Samsung RAM because achieving high frequencies with them isn't easy. So, let's go with 1.2 volts, which should be sufficient. Next, look for VDDQ CPU and set it to around 1.25 volts. VDD2 CPU is also a voltage for the memory controller, and it's usually set slightly higher than VDDQ CPU, ranging from 1.2 volts to 1.35 volts. For Samsung RAM, you don't need to go too high, so let's set it to 1.3 volts. Next, go to the DDR5 voltage control tab. Here, focus on the VDDA0 voltage, which is the voltage for the RAM itself. It's divided into 2 voltages, so for the first one, set it to around 1.435 volts for locked RAM. For the lower one, VDDQA0 voltage, set it about 0.05 volts lower, so around 1.38 volts. Great, we're done here. Press Escape. Next, you need to disable the following functions: DDR5 Auto Booster, High Bandwidth, and Low Latency. Then, go to Advanced Memory Settings. Set the gear mode to Gear 2 because Gear 1 doesn't work with DDR5. For Memory Boost mode, disable it temporarily while you're overclocking. You can enable it after you've finished the overclocking process. Don't forget to do that later. Now, go to the Memory Channels Timing tab. Let's start with primary timings. I suggest starting with 36 for the first timing, 44 for the second, and 44 for the third. For TRAS, use the formula TRCD-TRTP. Since TRTP for Samsung is 18, add it to 44, which gives you 62. Now, find the TRTP timing and set it to 18. Then, move down to find TRDPRE and also set it to 18. This will prevent the secondary timing RTP from being affected, which is what we want. For TWR, set it to around 72. For TCWL, use the formula TCL-2. Since TCL is 36, 36 minus 2 equals 34. You can also set it equal to TCL, it won't make much of a difference. For the rest of the timings, TRRDS, set to 8, TRRDL, set to 12, TWTRS, set to 10, TWTR, set to 22, TFAW, set to 32. I also recommend setting the command rate to 2. Setting it to T1 doesn't provide significant benefits, based on my testing, it's not worth it. Continuing with the settings, for Tertiary, on Samsung RAM, it rarely achieves 65,000, so set it to 32,640. Keep in mind that higher values like 65,000 will generate more heat on your RAM, and since Samsung RAM tends to run hot already, it's not advisable to go higher. There's not much to gain from it, set TXP and TCKE both to 12. Now, let's configure TRFC. On Samsung RAM, this parameter can go very high, up to 512 at high frequencies. If you have a 2-slot motherboard, it can even be above 560. For now, set it to the maximum, and later, if needed, you can lower it. Set TRFC to 512, TRFC2 to 512, and TRFC PB to 512. If you don't set TRFC, your RAM will work at a frequency of 5,800. I've already checked and spent 1.5 hours on this. A like for my wasted 1.5 hours would be appreciated. Next, move on to tertiary timings. It's better to set tertiary timings on Gigabyte boards right away. So, you can copy the tertiary timings from my settings. Next, set WRRDSG and WRRDDG using the formula on the screen, and for my modules, it's 66 and 54 in my case. Now, press F10 and enter Windows. We're in Windows now. First, download the folder with the programs we prepared for you. You can find the link in the description of this video. Also, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. It will make us happy and, more importantly, it's helpful. Now, go into the folder with the programs. We will need OverClock timing configurator. Periodically, you should run this program to ensure that your motherboard hasn't gone rogue and changed the timings. As you can see, they are duplicated here, which is great. Next, launch IDIS64. By the way, as you can see, TCKE is at 18, my apologies for that. Now, click on Tools and select Cache and Memory Benchmark. At this point, we are only checking the memory bandwidth to ensure that it hasn't significantly dropped. On a frequency of 5,800, it should look something like this. Keep in mind that the memory bandwidth might slightly differ depending on your CPU. If you see that your read or write speeds are 30 to 40% lower, it's a sign that something might be off, and you should double-check your settings and try the process again. If the latency is elevated, it might be due to TCKE slipping or an accidental misconfiguration, but it's not a major issue. We will come back and fix it shortly. Next, go into the Intel folder and find Cruncher. Right-click on it, go to Show More Options, and create a shortcut. Place this shortcut on your desktop. Go to the shortcuts properties, and in the target field, add a single space and then type stress VST in uppercase letters. After this, click Apply, then OK, and run the test. You need to complete about 10 rounds of testing. Currently, you're on the first round. After this, if there are no issues, crashes, or red error messages, proceed to the BIOS and continue. If errors do appear, it could be due to excessively high frequency, too low memory controller voltage, or too low RAM voltage, or a combination of these factors. First, try increasing the voltage or lowering the frequency. Wait for 10 rounds, then restart and re-enter the BIOS. I won't wait, so I'll go straight to the BIOS. Try increasing the frequency, start with 6,000. Run the test again, complete 10 rounds. Then, try 6,200, run the test again for 10 rounds, and then 6,400. If your motherboard has 4 RAM slots, 6,200 is likely the limit. If you have 2 slots, 6,400 might be achievable. For 4 slots, I suggest configuring the profile to 6,000. Why 6000? On average, Samsung RAM can achieve around 5800 to 6000 MHz. If needed, you can try 5800 or 6400. Next, adjust the CL timings at the same voltage. Generally, CL36 at 6000 MHz is good for Samsung, but you might be able to achieve CL34. Press F10, enter, and run the test. During the test, don't forget to run HW info to monitor the temperature. Here, you can see the SPD sensor, which indicates the temperature of the memory banks. Also, pay attention to the power consumption of each module. It's over 5 watts, these are indeed hot components, as I warned you. After completing about 10 rounds, run the MEM Test Pro test. Specify the number of threads your processor has. In my case, with a 12700K, that's 20 threads. Then, click Start. This test is good for verifying primary timings. If you need to check the memory controller frequency and voltage, Cruncher is excellent for that. So, these two tests can be considered an essential part of testing our system. Also, a very good test is Karha, but it's paid, and I can't include it in the archive. If more than 5 computers are simultaneously launched, my key will be banned, and I'll need to buy a new one, which costs about $10. If you have Karha, then push it up to about 400%. This is enough to understand that you are moving in the right direction. To find out if it's stable or not, leave it running overnight, maybe about 10 hours. Also, during Karha testing, don't forget to check the CPU cache enable and stress FPU options in the advanced settings. However, as a free alternative, you can use MEM Test Pro. It has some drawbacks, but it's free. The drawbacks are that it may sometimes use small cores instead of large ones. Consequently, the test may run longer, or you may need to restart it. In 5 minutes, no errors have been found, but that doesn't mean they won't appear later. Ideally, you should test for much longer, like an hour, 2, or 3. The longer, the better. Let's try a bit more. CL32 is possible. It might work with these modules. Go to the BIOS, set CL32, press F10, enter, and hope for a miracle. By the way, friends, don't forget to save the profile. Unfortunately, I forgot it this time. If it doesn't start now, it means I'll either have to remove the battery, short the jumper, or hope it will turn on. We're lucky, and it started right away. Launch the OverClock timing configurator, run the test, and hope it doesn't crash immediately. And miraculously, there are no errors right away, and there might not be any at all. Next, we can try CL30, but I don't want to mess with the battery, so I'll stick with CL32. In principle, this is already quite good. If I'm not mistaken, the JEDEC standard for these modules is 4800 CL40. So, what else can we do? We can lower TRCD and set the other secondary timings. Let's go to the BIOS. TRCD will probably be in the range of 36 to 40. I'll set it to 38. Then 38, TRS 3818, which will be 56. Next, we can adjust TRRDL. Since our memory is quite good, it might be possible to set it to 8. However, if you don't want to take risks or remove the battery, leave it at 12. I'll set it to 8. You can also try tightening TRFC. Ideally, TRFC should be a multiple of 8, meaning that when divided by 8, it should result in a whole number without a decimal point. If the value is something like 32.54, it's not a multiple of 8. It should be exactly 32. You get the idea. You can lower it in increments of 16, then test it. If everything is stable with no issues, you can keep it. I'll leave it as is for now. Since I accidentally set TCKE to 18, I'll revert it to 12. Teak Dead can stay on auto. What else can you do? You can set TCKE to 10 or 8, which allows you to tighten TRFC. They are somewhat related because TCKE is an energy-saving feature. Well, you can leave it at 12 for now. You can lower TXP to 10, which usually works, or even 8, but that's a 50-50 chance. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. By the way, lowering TXP can help reduce latency. You can also try setting TWRWSG to 16. As I mentioned earlier, there's not a very high chance it will work stably at 16, but it's possible. If you want to push it to the maximum, go ahead. I'll set it to 24. Also, remember to save your profile so you don't lose your efforts. In the BIOS, go to the Save and Exit tab, save the profile, and you're done. Press F10, enter, and check. After thoroughly testing your memory, which should take about 2 to 3 hours, preferably longer, and after running Cruncher for another 4 hours without any crashes or blue screens, and playing games like Call of Duty Warzone with low resolutions and low settings to put more stress on the CPU and memory, you can consider further voltage adjustments. So, after all of this, what else can we do? Right, tighten the voltages. Don't forget about that. Let's go to the BIOS. But regarding tightening the voltages, you do understand that after you change the VCCSA voltage, VDDQ voltage, and set VDDQ2 lower, you'll have to go through all the tests again. If you understand that, then go ahead. In principle, the VCCSA voltage can be set to 1.15 volts, but it may or may not work. If you're currently using 1.3 volts, lowering the voltage may lead to system crashes, although such cases are extremely rare. Also, VDDQ and VDDQ2 voltages are generally considered to be gentle, so you can leave them as they are. You can also try lowering the voltage for the RAM, but again, you'll need to run all the tests again. So, friends, this is approximately the overclocking we've achieved. It could have been even higher. I'm almost sure I could have reached 6400, as these modules are quite good. A latency of 63.2 is acceptable. Also, remember that latency is influenced by the CPU overclocking, which we haven't done here. And for those who watched till the end, here's a little bonus. Go into the BIOS, access the Settings tab, press Alt-F, and type VMD in capital letters. Select VMD configuration, then press Escape. That's it, you've entered a hidden menu. What does it offer? I don't know. Explore it, you might find some interesting settings. Be sure to write about it in the comments. That's all for now. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave your comments below. And see you in the next one.